Joining us now is Craig Snyder, President and CEO of the World Affairs Council of Philadelphia. And Craig, what's your reaction to these new airstrikes on these opium factories and poppy production facilities?
Well, it's a technique that goes back, a strategy that goes back to World War II, the use of air power not only against the means that the other side uses against you in a war, but the way that they fund their war against you. So it's a classic tactic, but it's new in this particular war. It's clear that the Taliban does get a lot of its resources from the opium trade. And if, as has been described by the U.S. Air Force, these attacks are limited to production facilities and storage facilities and command and control facilities for the opium trade, then this seems to me a very legitimate tactic in the war.
Is it also possible, though, that the Taliban simply, if they have less production, they simply raise the price that they will charge to global heroin dealers?
Well, that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing for anybody, including for the Americans suffering addiction to heroin. As the price goes up, demand tends to go down. So this actually not only could be an important tactic in the war in Afghanistan, but might even have some benefit to the opium crisis in the United States. You know, having said all that, there's an incredible disproportion here. The total value of the opium trade to the Taliban is estimated at about $200 million a year. One single F-22, which is the plane that was used, or one of the planes that was used in these strikes today, a single one of those aircraft cost $338 million. So we are throwing at this problem a scale of resources that sort of dwarfs the size of the problem.
And the problem with the Taliban is their ongoing threat to the Afghan government. How stable or not stable is the Afghan government these days, in your estimation?
Well, things are worse for sure now than they were a couple years ago. The rather rapid drawdown of U.S. ground forces in the last few years of the Obama administration and the announcement of the intention to withdraw all U.S. ground forces, those things certainly stiffened the resolve of the Taliban and caused a lot of setback in the war. President Trump has reversed those policies. I think it's fair to say at the urging of the generals on the ground, who probably weren't happy with them, at least that's what's reported, weren't happy with them under President Obama. And so now we have a policy not of using significant numbers of U.S. ground troops, but of really using air power in a much bigger way. It's estimated that by the end of this year, a month from now, we will have dropped probably 4 times the number of munitions on the Taliban this year as last year. So a dramatic change in the pace of the air war.
And Craig, as we look at this dramatic footage of the gun camera video that the U.S. military has released, and again, the Pentagon is saying this is a joint operation, so you'd presume that the targets are being identified by the Afghan government or their intelligence forces, and the United States is carrying out the airstrike. Is there always a danger, though, with that kind of arrangement that perhaps the intelligence may not be very good and what we may think is an opium factory may be something else?
Well, there is that danger, and frankly, there would be that danger even when the United States identifies its own targets. There's an incident not too long ago of the U.S. Accidentally bombing a hospital in Afghanistan with foreign aid workers in it as well. So those things happen in a conflict situation. But I do think that every effort's being made to minimize and the use of precision weapons. The general said today very clearly, we're not going after the farmers themselves. We're going after these sort of choke points in the hierarchy of the opium economy.
And then finally, Craig, what do you make of the Pentagon? Obviously, they made a big show of this, having General Nicholson essentially come in from Afghanistan through video connection, the Pentagon in front of all the reporters, releasing this slick video. How important is the, I don't know, the media impact on all of this in terms of, I suppose, going after the Taliban in that fashion?
I think it's very important that look, the president announced a new policy, sent additional boots on the ground, another 3,500 troops, and a lot of air power that was being used against ISIS in Iraq and Syria has now shifted back into Afghanistan because there's been relative success in the ISIS campaign. So there is a need to show the American people what they're getting for the lives that they're putting at risk and the money that they're spending, and this footage is designed to show that it's doing something, it's implementing a new strategy.
Craig Snyder, President and CEO of the World Affairs Council of Philadelphia. And Craig, thanks as always. We appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
You got it.